The smell of roast lamb and baked kamara drifted through the narrow streets of suburban Auckland. The sky above glowed with soft orange hues as the sun slipped behind the Waitakere Ranges, throwing long shadows over the houses. Inside a modest wooden villa, laughter spilled from the kitchen where the family had gathered, as they always did on a Sunday evening. Wairamu, the father, stood at the head of the long table. His presence was calm yet commanding, his deep voice guiding the rhythm of the gathering. He looked proudly at his children, now grown, yet still returning home to share a meal as if nothing in the world could disturb the tradition. Beside him, Mirana, his wife, moved swiftly between the kitchen and the table, her hands arranging dishes with care. She was the heart of these evenings, keeping the fire of warmth alive within the family. Around the table sat their 3 children. Tama, the eldest son, tall and confident, often took on the role of storyteller, filling silences with his wit. Anahara, the daughter, quiet yet sharp-eyed, carried a different energy, one of secrets untold. And Ringi, the youngest, restless and eager, leaned on his elbows, listening intently to every exchange. The sound of cutlery, the clink of glasses, and the rustle of bread being passed filled the air. Outside, cicadas hummed, weaving their song into the evening. It was a familiar chorus, one that comforted them all. But that night, beneath the laughter and the glow of candlelight, something different lingered. Anahara's gaze was distant, her fingers tracing invisible patterns along the wooden table. From time to time, she stole a glance at her father, her lips parting as if she longed to speak, only to press them shut once more. Wairma noticed. His brow furrowed slightly, though he said nothing. He had learned that silence sometimes revealed more than questions. Still, a flicker of unease stirred within him, though he brushed it aside with another toast, his voice carrying strong across the room. As the plates grew empty and the story slowed, Anahara shifted in her seat. She leaned closer to her father. Her small hand reached across, trembling as it clasped his. In the murmur of the evening, her voice was barely audible, yet clear enough to slice through the calm. "Dad," she whispered, "I need to tell you something." The words froze him. The chatter around the table blurred into silence. Every eye turned to them. Anahara's grip tightened, her knuckles pale. And with that single breath, the warmth of the Sunday evening gave way to something colder, something waiting to unravel. The air inside the dining room shifted the moment Anahara's words left her lips. The candles flickered, their flames bending as though caught in a sudden draft, and the soft hum of the cicadas beyond the window seemed to fall into silence. Wairma stared at his daughter, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and urgency. He had known her to be private, reserved, someone who carried thoughts like stones in her pocket. But never before had her secrets found their way to his ear in such a way. "What is it, Anahara?" he asked gently, his voice steady though his chest tightened. She swallowed, her throat dry. She had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in her mind, yet the words would not come easily. Around them, the family froze. Tama leaned forward, his grin fading, while Ringi shifted uncomfortably, sensing a storm he could not name. Mirana placed her hand on the table, steadying herself, her mother's instinct warning her of what was to come. Anahara's lips parted, but then she hesitated. Her eyes darted toward the window, as if searching for courage among the shadows of the night. At last, her voice broke the stillness. "There is something you do not know about me," she said, her words trembling. "Something that I cannot carry alone anymore." The room seemed to shrink. The warmth of the food, the laughter, the comfort of routine, all of it vanished into the weight of her confession left hanging in the air. Wairma reached for her hand again, his strong fingers wrapping around hers. "You are my daughter. Whatever it is, you can speak it here." Her breath caught, and for a brief moment, she almost wished to retreat, to bury the truth and let the Sunday meal continue as though nothing had been spoken. But the secret inside her was a tide rising fast, pressing against her ribs, demanding release. I am not who you think I am," she whispered, her eyes glistening. Mirana gasped softly. Tama's brows knitted in confusion. Ringi leaned forward, whispering her name, but she did not look at him. Wairma's grip tightened, his voice a low rumble. "Anahra, what do you mean?" Her shoulders shook, her breath ragged. She could feel the entire weight of her family's gaze upon her, pressing her into the chair, suffocating her. The fire crackled in the hearth, filling the silence that stretched like a blade between them. And then, just as her lips formed the next words, the door at the far end of the house creaked. All heads turned. A shadow crossed the hallway, slow, deliberate, and unfamiliar. The night, which had promised only routine and comfort, had shifted entirely. Something, or someone, was about to step into their world, carrying with it the answer to Anahra's unspoken truth. The creak of the door echoed through the quiet house. Every movement around the table ceased. The air felt heavy, as though even the night itself had drawn breath and held it. Wairmu rose slowly from his chair. His tall frame cast a shadow across the table, his eyes locked on the hallway where the sound had come from. "Stay here," he murmured, his voice low but steady. Anahra's hand slipped from his as he moved away. She gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white, her breath shallow. She knew, long before anyone else in the room could guess, she knew what presence lingered beyond that door. The figure stepped forward, the dim light spilling over him. A man, rough around the edges, his coat worn from long travel, his boots leaving faint marks on the wooden floor. His face, half lit by the glow from the dining room, carried lines carved by years of hardship. But it was his eyes that froze Anahra, eyes that mirrored her own. "Who are you?" Wairma demanded, his shoulders squaring, his stance protective. The man paused, scanning the family gathered at the table. His gaze lingered on Anahra, and in that silence, she lowered her head. "I am here for her," the stranger said, his voice graveled yet certain. "She has something that belongs to me, and I have something she must know." Gasps circled the room. Tama rose from his seat, fists clenched, ready to defend his sister. Ringi shrank back, his eyes darting between his father and the stranger. Marina's breath quickened, her heart thudding against her chest. Wairma's face hardened. "You do not come into my house and speak in riddles. Say what you have to say or leave." The man's lips curled into a faint smile, though it carried no warmth. He stepped closer, his boots thudding on the wooden boards. "Anahra," he said, his eyes never leaving hers. "You know me. You've always known. Tell them." Her throat closed. Every instinct screamed to remain silent, yet the weight of his presence pressed her towards truth. She could feel the eyes of her family upon her, waiting, demanding, fearing. Finally, she raised her gaze. Tears brimmed at the corners of her eyes, her voice breaking as she spoke. "He is my father." The words struck the room like thunder, shattering the fragile walls of certainty that had bound them for so long. The room erupted in silence, so heavy it felt louder than any shout. Wairmu froze, his body rigid as the stranger's words echoed in his mind. Anahra's whisper was still hanging in the air like smoke. Mirena pressed her hand to her lips, her eyes wide in disbelief. Thomas stared at his sister, unable to move, while Ringi gripped the edge of his chair, searching for answers that would not come. Wairma's voice finally broke through, low and controlled. "Explain yourself." The stranger stepped into the light, revealing the deep scars across his face. His voice carried the weight of years lost. "My name is Hemi. I am Anahra's true father, and I have returned because the time for silence is over." Wairma's fists clenched. He towered over the intruder, his presence darkening the space between them. "You dare walk into my house, my family, and lay claim to my daughter." Anahra rose from her chair, trembling. "It is true," she whispered, her eyes brimming with tears. "Mum knew. Dad. Mum kept it from you." Mirena gasped, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I did what I thought was right. He left, Wairmu. He left before she was born." Hemi's gaze burned. "I was taken from her. You do not know what happened." The family table that had always held laughter and stories now carried the weight of betrayal and secrets long buried. Anahara's voice trembled as she spoke again. I never felt whole. I always knew something was missing. Tonight, I could not hide it anymore. Wairma's heart cracked, though his face betrayed nothing. He turned his gaze from Anahara to Mirana, then to Hemi. The walls of trust he had built began to collapse, leaving only the raw ache of truth. And in the corner of the room, the fire hissed and spat, as if mocking the fragile threads that held the family together. The hours that followed blurred together in uneasy quiet. The plates of food sat untouched, their warmth fading, forgotten beneath the storm that had settled inside the house. Wairma stood by the window, staring into the night. His silhouette, sharp against the dim light, was that of a man battling shadows far heavier than his own reflection. Mirana sat at the table, her hands clasped, whispering apologies that found no reply. Rengi had retreated into silence, his young mind struggling to make sense of the broken truths scattered across the room. Tama paced the floor like a caged animal, his anger searing with every step. Anahara remained seated, her face pale, her hands trembling. Across from her, Hemi watched with a quiet intensity, his presence both unwelcome and undeniable. Why now? Wairma finally said, his voice sharp. Why tear this family apart tonight? Hemi's reply was steady. Because the truth cannot be buried forever. She has questions that only I can answer. And time is running short. What do you mean? Thomas snapped, his fists clenched. You think you can just walk in here, throw our lives into chaos, and speak in riddles? Hemi's eyes met his, unflinching. You will understand soon enough. Anahara's breath hitched. She leaned forward, her voice barely a whisper. Tell me then. Tell me everything. Hemi's expression softened, though the weight of sorrow lingered in his eyes. Not here. Not with walls, listening. I will take you to the place where it began. Only there will you know. The family exchanged uneasy glances. Outside, the cicadas had fallen silent, as if the night itself waited for what was to come. Morning broke with a pale, gray sky. The house was quiet, each member of the family moving like shadows of themselves, their thoughts heavy with the night before. Anahara packed a small bag, her hands shaking as she folded clothes. Mirana tried to stop her, pleading in hushed tones, but Anahara's resolve was firm. I need to know, she said simply, her voice low but unwavering. Wairma stood in the doorway, his face unreadable. His authority as the head of the household clashed with the love of a father who feared losing his daughter. After a long silence, he stepped aside. If you go, then you will not go alone. Thomas shouldered his jacket, standing tall beside his sister. I'll come. If he dares harm her, I'll stop him. Rengi ran after them, refusing to be left behind. You can't keep me out of this. Mirana wept softly, clinging to Wairma's arm. He said nothing, only placed a hand on her shoulder as if to steady her heart. Hemi led them from the house, his stride long and sure, as though he had always known they would follow. The path wound out of the suburbs, past the fields, and into the rolling green hills. The air carried the salt of the nearby sea, the cries of gulls drifting overhead. Anahara walked with her eyes forward, the ache in her chest mingled with something new, hope and dread in equal measure. And somewhere beyond those hills lay the answers she had longed for all her life. They traveled deep into the countryside, where narrow roads gave way to dirt tracks, and the hum of the city was replaced by the whisper of wind through tall grass. At last, Hemi stopped before an abandoned homestead, its walls weathered and gray, its windows empty like hollow eyes. The place felt alive with memory, its silence louder than any voice. This, Hemi said, his voice heavy, is where it began. Anahara stepped closer, her breath shallow. She felt the weight of the place pressing against her chest, as though the walls themselves remembered her. Wairma studied the ruins with narrowed eyes. Why bring us here? Hemi's gaze hardened. Because this land holds the truth. And the truth is not mine alone. It belongs to her. Inside, the air was thick with dust. Faded photographs clung to the peeling walls, their images blurred by time. An old cradle sat in the corner, broken yet unforgotten. Anahara touched the cradle, her fingers trembling. A rush of images flooded her mind, shadows of faces, whispers of lullabies she could not fully recall. She gasped, stepping back, her heart pounding. Hemi placed a hand on the cradle, his voice low. "This was yours. You were born here. Before I was torn from you." The words struck like thunder. Marina's sobs filled the silence. Wairma's jaw tightened, rage and sorrow warring in his eyes. Tama clenched his fists, his body trembling with fury. "Why should we believe you?" Hemi's eyes burned with truth. "Because she already knows. Her heart remembers, even if her mind does not." Anahara stood frozen, the weight of the revelation crushing her. Her entire life had shifted in an instant, her very identity rewritten. And yet, she felt there was more, much more. That night, they gathered around a fire built among the ruins. The flames cast long shadows across their faces, illuminating the storm of emotions etched into each one. Hemi spoke of the past, his words heavy with grief. He told of betrayal, of a family torn apart by forces beyond their control, of enemies who had sworn to erase his bloodline. "You are hidden," he told Anahara, his voice breaking. "Hidden to keep you safe. But those who sought to destroy us are still out there. And they know you live." The fire crackled. Anahara's heart raced. "Why me? Why now?" "Because you carry what they fear most," Hemi replied. "Our lineage, our legacy. You are the last of it." Wairma's anger boiled over. "Enough of this madness. You come into my home, you shatter my family, and now you spin tales of enemies and legacy." But even as he spoke, shadows flickered beyond the edge of the firelight. Tama caught sight of movement in the darkness, his hand instinctively reaching for a rock as a weapon. Rengi gasped. "There's someone out there." The family turned, the firelight flickering wildly as if warning them. Hemi's eyes narrowed. "They have found us." The night erupted into chaos. Figures moved in the shadows, their steps swift and deliberate. The family rose in panic, the fire snapping as if caught in the storm. "Run," Hemi commanded, his voice sharp. "Into the hills. Now." Wairmu grabbed Anahara's arm, pulling her close. Tama shielded Rengi as they fled into the darkness, their footsteps pounding against the earth. Mirana stumbled, but Wairmu caught her, dragging her forward with desperate strength. Behind them, shouts echoed, foreign voices calling in the night. The sound of pursuit grew louder, closing in. Anahara's heart thundered in her chest. The world around her blurred, the hills, the grass, the sky, all swallowed by fear and adrenaline. Yet even in her panic, she felt a strange clarity. This was the truth Hemi had spoken of. This was the danger she had been hidden from. They reached a ridge, the city lights faint in the distance. But the shadows were still upon them, relentless in their chase. Hemi turned, his body a barrier between the family and the pursuers. "Go," he shouted, his voice fierce. "I will hold them." Wairma's voice cracked with fury. "You will not take her from me again." But before he could drag Anahara further, the first of the pursuers broke through the darkness. The night became fire, steel, and blood. The clash rang out across the hillside. Shouts, cries, and the sound of struggle filled the night air. Hemi fought with the desperation of a man who had nothing left to lose. Wairmu, torn between rage and duty, joined the fight, his strength unyielding. Anahara, trembling, pulled her brothers close. Mirana held her tightly, shielding her with every ounce of her being. The attackers came in waves, their faces masked, their movements precise. They were not strangers of chance. They had come with purpose. Tama broke free, swinging a branch with wild fury, his roar echoing through the hills. Rengi, though terrified, hurled stones into the darkness, his small defiance burning bright. Through it all, Anahara's gaze locked on Hemi. His every strike, every breath, was a shield for her. She saw in him not only the father she had never known, but also the truth of the blood that flowed in her veins. And in that moment, clarity struck. This was not just a battle for survival. It was the beginning of something far greater. The storm that had lingered in whispers and shadows was now rising in full force. And Anahara, caught between two fathers, two worlds, stood at the heart of it. The night was not done with them,